Today, I'm joined by Mary McFarlin, and she has been dedicated to supporting students in the Washington state area. In 2023, her business, Sound Literacy Solutions, introduced the Morphology Kit, which we're going to talk a little bit more about today. And this is a suite of engaging lessons that offers explicit instruction and practice opportunities to enhance students' morphological awareness in reading, spelling, and syntax. So, welcome, Mary. Hello, and great to have you on.
Great. Thank you so much. Great to be here.
We'll start off with your early life journey because I know a lot of people who want to become dyslexia specialists sometimes see where we're at in our careers now and think, how on earth do I get there? Were there any signs in, your schooling or your childhood that would have made you, looking back, think this was going to be a pathway I was going to take?
Well, my journey was a little different because I actually started out in the social service mental health field, working with teenage girls actually in the juvenile justice and residential treatment setting. But then I had my own child, and when she was in school, her school told us that they were not going to teach her handwriting, that they were going to move her right into assistive technology. And this was almost 20 years ago. They were going to give up on handwriting. And that just struck me as just wrong. And at that moment on, we kind of shifted gears, found a new school, and her new school provided educational therapy. And I fell in love with it, saw the transformation, and switched careers. So that almost 20 years ago, I think that was in 2006. And then by 2007, I had started my training and was licensed to do educational therapy. And it just kind of snowballed from there. And originally, I maybe only intended to work with my own child, but then I ended up totally shifting gears and went full hog and started my own practice and eventually got two different certifications. So yeah, so I didn't start out in education.
Amazing.
I probably kind of wish I had, but it's nice having a background in that mental health, more psychology field, though. It's helpful. So yeah.
Yeah, in what ways do you feel that helps you in your dyslexia practice?
Well, I think so I worked with students, all female girls, and this was well before I had my own child. And I think it just really got me comfortable with, child development and the stages, and also how, stress impacts education, and just working with a different population of kids. Also, I think it just gave me a really good background in understanding the appreciation for assessing kids and getting them, looking at their behaviors and their learning needs and how that affects education. So even though I'm not a psychologist, I appreciate that background in looking at how when kids come in, the more we know about them and their social situation and their family situation, how that affects their education. And I think that's really important. It's an important piece to recognize. So I think I'm grateful for having kind of that different background as well. How it fits into the whole puzzle with my own child having lots of different neuropsychological evaluations done, and getting her diagnosed so she could get the services she needed in her school. And realizing when there was a problem, when they said she can't learn to write, I knew enough to know, nope, that's not true. So, yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about that. So you've got this child that's struggling. You've got a school that's saying we're just not going to focus on that. We're going to switch paths. And you said that you didn't feel right about that, even though you hadn't had that background in dyslexia. What kind of gave you that conviction to say no, that's not how I want it to go? I think she can learn to write.
I think I just recognized how setting the bar higher could help her, and I was fortunate that we lived in a big city at the time, and I was around enough people that knew of these programs. Like, oh, have you heard about educational therapy? Have you heard about this? So I looked it up, and like literally, there was a school a couple blocks from our house. Now, we only had one child, so we were able to afford to do this. So, I realized looking back, that's not an option. And of course, the school she was at was, she loved it socially, but it was totally, balanced literacy, whole language. It was not a school that she would have, that would have been a good fit for her anyhow. So, and again, this is almost 20 years ago. So there wasn't, it was fully, early 2000s. It was definitely, I didn't know anything about structured literacy. But I'm grateful because right away, the program I got trained in, I was through the National Institute of Learning Development. Right away, it was a Orton Gillingham based program that I learned, and boy, she did handwriting, and she really overcame a lot of her challenges by switching gears and getting the help that she needed. So.
You mentioned that Orton Gillingham course. Can you tell us exactly how you became aware of that? Because one of the questions I get a lot is, how did you become certified? I'm trying to find what sort of courses I should be doing,
Right.
what's good and what's not good. So how did you pick that? What was the process for deciding that was the right one for you?
Right. Well, I picked this particular program because it was the one my daughter was enrolled in at her school, and it used a program that was a modified Orton Gillingham, which at the time I had never heard of. But right away, the conferences, it was Louisa Moats and Virginia Behringer, like they were literally at our conferences. So I feel like I really got I dove right in, and so back when I started, the organization, which has been around quite a number of years, it's one of the many that the IDA has accredited now. They were getting their accreditation, and so part of that process of becoming a professionally certified educational therapist at the time was also simultaneously you could do the practicum, get your hours in to be certified by CERI, by the Center for Effective Reading Instruction. So, and I believe back then it was first called a dyslexia therapist. Since then, they've changed it to a structured literacy dyslexia specialist. And it took me about 6 years. I kind of did the slower route, partly for financial reasons. I was raising my child, and at the same time, I was seeing, students. Back then, it was all in person, of course. So I kind of did the slow route. It took me 6 or 7 years to get my CERI certification. So, and then every year, of course, I do the continuing ed. Nowadays, though, so my daughter is interested now in the field, so I've been looking into it again for her. And there's a lot more organizations now. There's a lot more options. You can do it online. So back then, I had to travel. Like I went to the East Coast for my training, and it was in the Seattle area, one of the trainings. But nowadays, it's probably more expensive nowadays, but it's easier. You can do it online. You can, there's just so many more options now, I feel, than there was when I did it. But I highly recommend it. There's different types of certification, but I've been really happy that I have my dyslexia specialist certification. And I did let my educational therapist one drop because I focus now more on structured literacy and reading and spelling and morphology, just the literacy piece. I kind of switched gears a little bit. So now that's my main focus.
So talk us through that journey a little bit, because I know a lot of people are in a similar situation. Either they've had a child with dyslexia that they're trying to support in the process of becoming certified, and then often working a job on top. So talk us through that
Right.
timeline of so you noticed your daughter was having these struggles. The school wasn't necessarily forthcoming and wanting to help her with the things you thought she could learn to do. How did you step that out? So how much were you working with her? How did you fit in your certification? How did that all work for you logistically?
Right. She attended the school that she went to for the educational therapy for 3 years, and we worked a lot with her at home. Though we did we practiced every night with her. And she attended that school for 3 years. We ended up moving, and now we actually live on an island. So I actually worked then with her at home as well. And back when back when I did the process, the hours that I did were counting towards my professional certification as an educational therapist. And then those hours also counted for my CRE certification. Nowadays, I'm not sure how that works with organizations. So I think it's a lot different. But I think for parents, uh, to take the time that you need to, because your own child is your focus. But also, even just taking on a couple of students, that hands-on is so important. And if you can find a mentor, that's really helpful too. Later on, after we had moved, I actually ended up taking some Wired for Reading courses, which is a linguistics program based out of Seattle. And that was very helpful because I actually met with a mentor, and she kind of showed me how she did it. So if you can do that hands-on mentorship, I really recommend that. It preferably in person, but online could work too. And I ended up not being certified in Wired for Reading, but I took all of their courses, and I feel it really complemented my OG kind of background, because now I feel like I have a really thorough understanding of different approaches to literacy. And I like to think of taking kind of the best of the best, and kind of incorporating that into my practice. And then that's the Wired for Reading is what got me so interested in the morphology, because at the time there weren't morphology courses. And then lo and behold, about 13 years ago, I found a Wired for Reading class, ended up taking it 3 times because I fell in love with it. And so it's interesting how, you kind of find your niche, so to speak. And like now I mostly work with grades 4 and up. I'm collaborating with another tutor who works with the younger students. It's working out really well. So just kind of, it was all kind of just happened. It wasn't really intentional. Like, oh, I want to work with 4th graders, or, oh, I want to, work with morphology. But anyways, I hope that answers your question. It's just so kind of hard to pinpoint. Everything just kind of fell together for me. It's been an interesting journey. And, just, I guess my advice, if you have your own child that you're working with, just, take your time. Your child is your priority, and eventually, some programs you have a limited number of years, I believe you have to complete it within, but don't feel rushed. Just, yeah. So sorry.
That is a really interesting interesting take on that. I hadn't really thought about just following your nose and letting it happen. For me, it was quite different. It was very, like, I pushed every step of the way. But so your advice would be, sometimes if you just start learning and start implementing things, then you'll become aware of different things in time when you need them.
Yes, I do feel though, when you're starting out, like when I first started out, I mean, finding your methodology and your program, definitely I followed that with fidelity. I mean, that's what it's intended for, right? And then and that's why these mentors are so helpful, within your program. But then eventually, I started kind of more implementing some, the Wired for Reading, the morphology piece into what I did. And like now I do a lot more, the emphasis on the speech to print is stronger than it was when I was originally trained, almost 20 years ago. So, but programs change too, though, as you know, like, so when you're starting out, though, following with that fidelity is really important. But then you continue training. Like, I'm so glad I went and did the Wired for Reading training. I just really, attend conferences, like do everything you can. I'm so glad live conferences are back. I'm so excited that I get to actually go and, in person, and to get to know others and talk to people. Cause it's kind of lonely when you're by yourself. I don't have colleagues. So to have these Facebook groups and, if you can find a mentor within your program you're training in, and, just to collaborate as much as possible is so helpful. I guess that would be my other big piece of advice, and be open to just training, and hopefully everyone who does this loves what they do, because once you get into it, as like it becomes like your life, and just I'm always looking for new, always reading and discovering and following the science. As think like this year, this is really popular. This year, oh no, that's not so helpful. The evidence isn't supporting it. Just to really follow and be open, I guess would be my advice.
Mm-hmm,
So.
mm-hmm. And do you have I call them gods of dyslexia that that I've followed over the years, or like my favorite researchers. Do you have anyone that you think, that's someone you should really get to know and that you follow their stuff ongoing?
Well, I of course my big thing is morphology now. I really loved William Van Cleve. I was happy to have taken some of his courses, and he just has a gift for teaching other teaching teachers, basically. And so he's been a favorite of mine. And of course, I really enjoy listening to Louisa Moats, and then with morphology, Deb Glaser and Lynn Stone, who's also Australian. I just really, love what they have to say. At some of the conferences, we've got to see like Dr. Katz, and a lot of the actual researchers are there. Yeah, there's lots of different people. I could probably go on and on, but I would say William Van Cleve is definitely someone that I really I miss. But luckily, they have a lot of his things out there still to look at, and yeah, trying to think of anyone. And those are my main two, I guess you would say.
Was there a sliding doors moment for you that kind of got you more into the morphology side? So I know you developed the Morphology Kit, which we'll talk about, but what was the sort of pivotal moment where you decided that that would be something you'd like to develop?
Well, honestly, seeing the amazing results in my students when they were exposed to our structure of our language. I live on an island; it's very small, and the students they don't have much structural literacy when they come to me, and just to see them having those aha moments where, oh, this is what our language is like. When the words get longer, they're not necessarily harder, because we're learning all these meaning units, and the same affixes are used over and over again, and these common roots are used in over 100,000 words, and the parents love it too, and it's transformative. And I think that and it's fun to teach, and it's fun to learn. I mean, I've actually had students thank me, like say, I need to thank you. Like, this is helping me so much. And I think for me, it's just, and it was new to me. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's different in Australia, but like, we didn't have any of that when I was a kid, like none of it. And it's so it's, not just the spelling and the reading, but I've had parents say, oh, my students' vocabulary is so much better. And it's for every student too. It's not just a kid with dyslexia. Every student benefits from it, and all ages. Of course, I focus more on the Latin morphology, so I tend to, work more with grades 4 and up. But it's just so helpful, and I'm so glad that there's more coming out now. Like, I hope more and more trainings come out with morphology. I know there's a few out there, but something I hope to see more of is some training, because teachers are getting excited about it. So I'm hoping more of that comes out. So, and because I'm guessing other teachers are seeing the same thing I'm seeing with their students, how it's so wonderful for the students.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way. It is the same in Australia. It is only just kind of starting to take off. Thankfully, phonics is well on its way. But yeah, there is that big gap in the morphology resources, especially for the older kids. And I'm not saying morphology is only for older kids, because it's not. We should be introducing it really low down. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, a lot of that, progressing them through when they need that systematic intervention, not just through phonics when they're first learning the code, but then also when they're getting up to those more complex words, like you're saying, that these big multisyllabic words are actually just made up of the same meaning chunks reused in different ways.
Yes,
So
exactly.
tell us a bit more about how you developed it. And so you were running a private practice at this time.
Yes.
Um, Again, logistically, how do you squeeze all of that in? How did you come up with the idea for how it all came about, and who did you write it for?
So originally, I would lug around all my different resources that I have. There's some good ones out there, and of course I had my training from my Wired for Reading, but I was making up kind of all my own and then supplementing, and then I started working online primarily, and then I was like, like you know what am I going to do? Well, first happened when the schools shut down. Of course, we all went online. So I was like, trying to come up with all my different, Jamboards and making all my morphology materials. And I always thought, I would really like to kind of make this more of my own sequence with my own practice activities. Because yes, we can all introduce a morpheme, but we need to be able to practice it and apply it and review it over and over again, especially our students that have some learning differences. So the big thing for me was my husband got laid off from his job, and I don't have technical skills, but he does. So that's when I thought, okay, this is my time. We're going to do this. And so we started that, I guess about a year ago. And I had already had some of a lot of my games and things I had already put onto WordWall. So, so it was a lot of just my own stuff I made. So I just had just every day, not every day, but every weekend and Friday, I sit down and I work on it and I work on it. And then he's the one that puts it into the digital slides, because I think there's a big need for digital products for teachers and online, whether or not you're in the classroom or online, we all want digital. We don't want to just be printing papers all the time. And so it was born, and it's been really exciting, and I use it every day with my students, and which is great. So I'm constantly tweaking it. Oh, this is a little something here and there, but and so that's kind of how it was born, um, and it's brand new though. We launched at the very very end of 2023. So
And for
yeah.
anyone who hasn't seen it, can you explain like exactly what is it? So if I'm looking at the Morphology Kit, what's in it? What does it do? Like what student?
Right.
How am I using this with my students?
Sure. So far we have three products. We have one that is strictly it's tier two vocabulary words, and we have developed word family activities around a tier two vocabulary word. So some of the activities are word analysis, where you're breaking the words apart, and then word synthesis, where you're putting the pieces together. And then we also have some fluency drills where the students are reading the words as they change, all the related words. And we have oral word chains where the student says, kind of like phonemic awareness, but it's done with morphemes. So, change the prefix, change the suffix. And those are oral and spelling word chains. And also some fill in, the close reading activities, and then some parts of speech activities. So each word has 10 activities. So those are some sets, and there's like 8 or 10 in each set. So those are called our word families. And then we also have some word chains, which are these word chaining activities that I realize are so empowering, especially for spelling, where you just change one part of the word. It's just like word chains with phonemes, except it's with morphemes. And the students are blown away by what they can spell. And then our main product is our Latin progression. Eventually we'll have probably about 55 Latin morphemes. So far we're just about to launch our third set. And those have core lessons introducing the morphemes, with some word building activities and deconstructing activities. And then every lesson, there's prefixes, roots, and suffixes. every lesson also has 6 to 10 different activities. It could be word chains, it could be sorts, it could be some parts of speech activities and some spelling activities. And then built in, if someone wants to follow the progression, there's some built-in review as well. So, because review is really important. As we know, if kids, it's like vocabulary. If we don't interact meaningfully with what we're learning, we're going to forget it. And so lots of review built in. But teachers don't have to follow our progression. That's the one I use that I have found really helpful. It starts with the more transparent morphemes, and then we add in ones that have, some more chameleon prefixes or different root forms. And then, but it's all the high utility affixes and the roots that we encounter. As I tell my students, you read these and say these and hear these every day. So, and I try to make it kind of fun. Eventually, I'd like to come out with more games and things like that. I just haven't had the time to put those into a digital, format yet. But I have a whole bunch of games on my head, in my head. So, yeah.
And you mentioned that you have the progression there, and you talked a little bit about that. I know one of the major debates that goes on between phonics and morphology is that morphology is a lot harder to do in a step-by-step, obvious progression from easiest through to hardest. How do you tackle that in your progression?
Well, honestly, the biggest challenge is the vocabulary. When you get into these word families, the vocabulary can get pretty advanced. Like say you have a word like sustain and sustainability and sustenance. Like that's pretty advanced vocabulary. So it's kind of hard to break it. Every kid is so different. I'm sure you've noticed. Like one fourth grader could have a quite advanced vocabulary and another one doesn't. So that's the biggest challenge. I would say the concepts of the word parts, though. I think if you do it in a sequential manner with continual review and practice and include pronunciation. Like there's a lot of, suffixes can be tricky. The ION suffix, right? The AL suffix, when you use AL versus consonant LE, like all. But if we practice and draw their attention to it and do word sorts and also practice spelling and pronunciation, kids actually really get it. I think it having that sequence, and I realized, we all know morphological awareness is valuable. How to teach it and exactly which ones to teach, that's the part there is not a consensus on. But I actually find that if you choose a progression, just choose the high, whatever program you're using, choose the most common morphemes and structure it, where you're continually reviewing and showing students the word parts, having them put the word together, then giving them words and having them break them down. It really, really is eye-opening to them. Like they can read words they never thought they could read because they're learning. Oh, you add the AL suffix and the LY suffix, and then I think it's not. I think it's actually, if you choose a progression and you go with it, I think kids really get it. I think their brains want to see structure like this. It's amazing to them. And I think word families in particular are super eye-opening to these kids. And then I guess with
What do you mean by word families?
The word families would be seeing the relationship between the words, like contain and container and containing. That would be, with some of the Anglo-Saxon suffixes, or you could get like sustain and sustenance and sustainability, and then using them right away in sentences, like talking about the word families, what their parts of speech are, and then showing them in the families, and applying it right away is really helpful, because if you're teaching one word, you're actually teaching you could be teaching 10 words actually just by that one word family, looking at the smallest base word and then looking at all the related words and keeping the vocabulary appropriate to their level, of course. So Because if they
What
know the
role do
word,
you think morphology plays? Sorry,
oh, go
I keep
ahead.
talking over you. There's so many things you're saying, and I'm like, I have to ask more about that.
No, please do.
Um,
I get so into it, I talk a little fast. So.
yeah, no, that's I'm the same way. I mean, it's just I think it's just a natural thing about being a bit of a word geek, especially with
Yes,
morphology. Um,
I know.
what role do you think morphology plays in self-teaching?
Um, like within students, you mean like for the students? Yeah,
Yeah.
I I think a lot because I think students are starting to notice, and I'll even have them say things like that. Like they're starting to notice, or like, oh, I don't know that word, but I know a related word, so I bet I can guess that meaning. Like they really start to think that way. They start thinking morphologically. So they'll see a word and oh yeah, I know a related word. And same with spelling. Like I'll tell them, oh, well, if you think of a related word, it might wake up a vowel. Like it might wake up a unstressed syllable, so you can spell it more easily. And I think eventually they, with over time, they'll do it. Um, it's just naturally. It's kind of how our brains are, right? We we look for the familiar. And I also tell students, when we read longer words, we're not reading sound by sound. We are reading in units. So it's almost like we're training our brain to read that way. And that's why I'm a big believer in reading the individual morpheme units for fluency practice, because then when they go to read the word, they'll recognize it. Like the woman who trains Wired for Reading, she says the common prefixes are so common. They're in over 95% of words are like the same prefixes. Words that contain prefixes, they have the same ones over and over. She said, we want our students to know those like they know how to spell their name. We want them to read it like they know how to read like it needs to be that automatic. And I think there's a little bit of hesitation on that, but I have found it extremely helpful. And the rewards program, has that. You are reading individual morphemes and word parts, syllables. And I feel like there's a lot of evidence behind that, and I see it all the time. But one thing with the suffixes, I do use William Van Cleve's advice, and I refer to them by their spelling, because as we know, they're not always they don't always look like they should, or they don't sound like they look. So I picked up his advice there. um, yeah, so hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because they're not phonetically stable often, like ED, and we're trying to teach it makes four different sounds instead of teaching that it's ED and it's
Exactly.
a
Yeah,
past tense verb.
exactly.
And what challenges have you had in setting up this program? So has this become your main focus and the main part of your business now? And if so, yeah, how do you get through some of those harder times when things are not necessarily working out the way that you'd hoped?
We are going to be representing at Big Sky this year, meaning we're going to have a booth. So I'm hoping to kind of get some word out at Big Sky, which is like my favorite. We get to drive there; it's close enough. So it's like my favorite reading conference. So I'm hoping to get some word out, and then I guess just not having a business background. Like I've always just been, I just want to help my students, right? Like that's all I've ever wanted to do. So that would be my biggest obstacle, and not having the funds to pay anyone to do that for me, right? So really just figuring out, oh, how do we advertise this? What what's the smartest way to go about that? Because just really trying to keep it small business, low budget, keep our overhead down, so therefore our costs can stay low. That's probably the biggest challenge. That and just finding time. But I do take Fridays off, so Fridays is like my product day that I work on my product. Um, so yeah, so really just kind of we're just taking it slowly, getting hopefully getting some, sharing a little bit on social media and that sort of thing.
Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about that transition from specialist teacher to business owner? Because I know that was a hard one for me, and I know that's something that people in the audience quite often talk about is that I felt like that too. I'm a teacher. I don't know how to run a business. I just want to help the students and I just want to help the families. Um, How do you
Yeah.
navigate that? Do you educate yourself around it? You mentioned that you blocked out some time specifically for that.
Yeah, it really helps that I have my business partner, who's my husband, because I can kind of send him down some rabbit holes. But last summer, what I did is I attended a couple of those online, like Teachers Making Money online summits, and those were really helpful. They have a lot of people on there on bookkeeping and advertising, and that's how I started my Facebook page. Was they had a presenter like how to start a Facebook page. It's like, oh, that's a good idea. So that same day, I went out and started a Facebook page, and it wasn't even, I didn't even have my business yet at that point. I just was wanted to talk to others about morphology, and so yeah, that would be
What's the name
the
of your Facebook group?
it's the Morphology Teachers Hub. So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Sorry to
and
interrupt your thought.
almost 10,000. Yeah, almost 10,000 people have joined it. So there's a big interest in
That's amazing.
morphology, and it's a place
Yeah.
to share what works for you. I mean, it's like teachers, parents, tutors, all sorts of different principals. Lots of different people have joined it from all over the world. So it's kind of exciting. So I really recommend those kind of those summits, and a lot of them are for teachers. There's another one called like the Tutor Success Academy, and like different ways, if you have an education background, different opportunities that we can do, like blogging and podcasting and all of it. That was really helpful. This summer I probably don't have time for that, but that was kind of my focus last summer, was educating myself, because I was getting ready. We were just kind of starting this to kind of put everything down and get it out there. But yeah, and then just time management. But it helps. I mean, I'm an empty nester, so I don't have a lot that I have to do outside of my own students. So that helps.
What are the main challenges that you see facing our industry at the moment?
Part, I think, really weeding out. It's overwhelming. It's almost like information overload, and just figuring out what to use. There's all this controversy over what's best practice and what's evidence based, and just the whole reading wars, and um, and what I do as a private practitioner is, how do I have students that go to school all day, and how do we support them when they might be getting something completely different in school, and just when you only see a student part-time, and then personally, one of the things I really struggle with in my community is just the whole equity issue of not everyone can get reading support, and that is something that I struggle with. So I think really is helping get more structural literacy into the schools, and in my community, that's not happening as quickly as I'd like it to. So I would say that would probably be the hardest thing, and just just that, and knowing what to that what it's just overwhelming, like what to use, and social media, all the different avenues and opinions everyone has. It's just sorting through everything, and kind of, I don't know.
How do you stay inspired and motivated to keep working in this field and helping the students that you help?
Well, for me, going to these conferences again has been a real boost for me, to go in person, and talk to others, and just seeing the kids. I mean, it's all about these kids that we help. And if I feel, sometimes I feel, how am I going to make a difference with, my little product that I'm sharing? But then I sit and use it with my student. I'm like, no, this is so great, and I just kind of focus on, what's in front of me and these kids, and how wonderful they are, and just and just constantly reading and learning. And I love it. So for me, it's something I'll do it until I can't. But I think for me personally, after, especially being a solo practitioner and being after we had the shutdown with COVID and everything, to be in person again and talk to other people is really helpful for me, because it can be a lonely space when, it's just me. So.
Yeah, because we're all squirreling away at home working with our little caseload of students. And it
Yes.
is those opportunities for even professional conversations are so much more limited.
Yes.
But yeah, it's
Yes.
good to know that there are. So you talked about the Facebook groups, the conferences, the mentorship, um, and that kind of thing, where we can try and stay in touch at least with other
Exactly.
specialist teachers. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially now that if we're working mostly online, I think that in person, when we can get it, is even more important. Yeah.
Will AI replace teachers?
No. I hope not. Oh gosh, I hope not. Yeah. And that's interesting that you mentioned, because the one thing I'm having trouble expressing, and this is why I would love to have some videos available, is so much of teaching morphology or any aspect of literacy is the interaction. It's the language. It's the discussion. It's the application. Like any list of words, you can expand it and do so much with it. And it's not just about printing out the activities and giving them as homework. They can be used that way. Most of them, they could be done as independent practice, I'm a big believer in interactively doing it, either small groups and then getting together, or just doing it like I do, interactively with my students. And that won't be replaced by AI. Can't. That level of interaction.
Yeah, that really human element that happens when kids, especially with morphology, it's that very linguistic task, isn't it? It's that sharing of even the wrong ideas, not always the right ideas, but just that
Uh-huh.
thinking about fleshing it out and what could it mean and how could it be used in context.
Exactly.
And then when they use it sometimes in those slightly incorrect contexts, and you sort of go, that's a really fascinating idea you had there. It's not quite right, but I can see, it's all those things, a very mentally flexible task that happens in
Exactly.
real time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to share that you feel like you haven't shared with us so far?
No, this has been uh, really helpful. And I always try to think, what would I have wanted to know back when I was starting out? And, but I think nowadays, they, they're doing a good job of, it's, there's so much out there. It's just like we talked about, figuring out what to follow. But there's some books that have come out in recent years. Like I recently read, Beneath the Surface of Words. Like, how great would that have been if that existed 20 years ago? Like, Lisa Moat's Speech to Print, I read originally, her earlier version. But there's so many wonderful books out there that just reading them gives you, oh, this is how our language is structured. This is, so eye opening. And I think that would be, if someone said, what's the number one thing you could recommend right now? There's a couple of great books out there and great authors, and just start with that, and the rest will, it'll happen.
Yeah, the heart of it for me, I don't know if it's the same for you, is that people really do need to understand that English is morphophonemic. It's not phonetic, it's
Yeah,
morphophonemic.
yeah. Yeah, and interestingly, recently I've been watching a lot of spelling. That's my other thing I'm kind of working on. And a spelling. When I say spelling, I mean the common vowel sounds of English, as a foundation before starting morphology, if that's needed for some of our students, which it is. And I've been watching a lot of spelling webinars lately, and I cannot believe the number of them that either they don't mention morphology, or it's just mentioned in like one little sentence. And I don't understand that. Like, like, to me, my brain can't think that way even. Does that make sense? It's like that's not, you know, that's not covering our language, like you said, our morphophonemic language. Yeah.
Yeah, it sometimes is in there kind of implicitly, but not explicitly. And
Yes.
yeah, it's that really explicit exploration of it that gets the kids, like you said, recognizing vocabulary words that they haven't seen before, or being able to spell words, knowing the different chunks that they could put together to spell those multisyllabic words. If anyone's looking to get in touch with you or learn more about the Morphology Kit or your practice, where can they go?
So if we actually go straight to themorphologykit.com, that'll take someone right to our website. It's themorphologykit.com. And then I also have a Sound Literacy Solutions Facebook page where I try to post, sample pages and updates about our products. And then, of course, anyone at all just interested in morphology in general, of course, we have our Facebook group, the Morphology Teachers Hub. So it's a great group that I would love anyone to join.
I can definitely vouch for that. I'm in that group, and it is just a constant source of little nuggets of information and practice and resources that even now is very, very useful. Um, well, thank you so much for your time today, Mary. It was an absolute joy talking to you and learning a bit more about morphology and your career progression as well. We really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. It was so nice meeting you, Sarah. And I can't wait to listen to more of your podcasts. So thank you.